Thera stood in the observation deck of the harmonious dawn, watching the stars drift past in comfortable silence. The crystalline patterns on their skin shifted between soft blues and greens, reflecting their calm mood. 3 weeks had passed since the joint expedition began, and the young Velian scientist had filled countless journals with observations about their human companions. The humans were fascinating, contradictory in ways that made no sense to Velian logic. They laughed easily, shared meals with genuine warmth, and spoke of art and music with deep passion, yet each one carried weapons. Every single day, even Dr. Hana, the xenobiologist who spent her mornings showing Theris pictures of her garden back on Earth, wore a pistol on her hip. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said. Behind them, Theris turned to see Captain Duan approaching. The human commander was tall with gray threading through his dark hair. His eyes were kind but somehow always watching, always calculating. "Yes, Captain," Theris replied in their musical voice. "Though I must ask again, why do all humans carry weapons during a peaceful research mission?" Day One smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Old habit. Better to have them and not need them than need them and not have them. But we have encountered nothing dangerous. The galaxy has been at peace for 300 cycles. You're part of the galaxy, maybe." Day One looked out at the stars. "Humanity learned a long time ago that peace is something you have to be ready to defend." Before the Laris could respond, Lieutenant Tammon's voice crackled over the ship's communication system. "Captain, we're approaching KX 447. You'll want to see this." The bridge was busy when they arrived. Pilot Sun Ho sat at the controls, his hands moving with practiced precision. Engineer Mi was at the scanning station, her face lit by the glow of multiple displays. Tae Min stood near the weapons console. Even though weapons were supposedly unnecessary, their MJI said, pointing at the main screen, dead center of the planet. "It's massive," the Laris felt. Their skin flashed bright yellow. Excitement. The structure on the screen was enormous, easily the size of a small city. Ancient architecture, unlike anything in the known databases. Spires and domes made of some dark material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "How old?" Day One asked. "At least 10,000 years, Dr. Hana said from her station. "Maybe older. This predates the Velian conqueror, predates the Foundation Wars, predates everything in our historical records." "Could be important," Sang Ho said quietly. The skin shifted to a puzzled orange. "Why do you always assume danger? This is an archaeological discovery, not a battlefield." "Because old places have old secrets," Tammon said, checking his rifle for the third time that hour, "and secrets don't usually want to be found." Within 2 hours, they had landed near the structure and assembled an exploration team. The watched with growing confusion as the humans prepared. Day One wore full combat armor. Tammon carried enough weapons for 3 people, even Hana. Cheerful Hana, who talked about flowers and poetry, loaded her pistol with practiced efficiency. "This seems excessive," Thelaris said to MJI, who was strapping on a tool belt that included several items clearly designed for fighting rather than engineering. MJI smiled, but her eyes were serious. "My grandfather used to say, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. It's kept my family alive for 6 generations." The entrance to the structure was a massive archway 50 ft Tall, the doors had rotted away centuries ago, leaving a dark opening that seemed to swallow their lights. The air inside was cold and stale with a strange metallic smell that made Dalaris's sensors tingle. Uncomfortably, their footsteps echoed. Vast chambers, the walls were covered in writing that none of their translation programs could decipher. Strange machines lined the corridors, their purpose unclear, their design alien. Even to Dalaris' advanced understanding, this place is incredible, Hana whispered, scanning everything with her equipment. The technology here is beyond anything we've seen. If we could understand even a fraction of it, stay alert. Day 1. Ordered. Sun Ho, mark our exit route. Tammin, watch our backs. They moved deeper into the structure. Theorists noted in their journal, humans prepare for violence even in moments of discovery. I find this simultaneously tragic and puzzling. They cannot simply enjoy the wonder of this place. They must always be ready to fight. But then the drones stopped responding. 5 autonomous mapping drones sent ahead to chart the structure simply vanished from the tracking system. One moment they were there, the next moment nothing. Communications failure, MJI suggested, but her voice was tense. All 5 at once. Tin had his rifle up now, scanning the shadows. Not likely. Tay-T. They found the first body in the central chamber, not a recent corpse but an ancient one, preserved somehow in the dry air. Then another, then dozens, then 100. The entire chamber was a mass grave, beings from species Theris had never seen. All dead, all with expressions of absolute terror frozen on what remained of their faces. What happened here? Dalaris breathed, their skin flickering between colors they couldn't control. Hana was scanning one of the bodies. These wounds, they're not from weapons. Something consumed them, drained them. The lights flickered just for a second, but long enough for everyone to notice. In that moment of darkness, Theris saw something move in the shadows at the far end of the chamber, something vast. When the lights came back, Day 1 was already issuing orders back to the ship now. Combat formation, but the discovery Theris started can wait until we know what we're dealing with. Day 1 cut them off. His voice was calm but absolute. Move. As they retreated toward the entrance, Theris looked back at the chamber of the dead. For the first time in their peaceful life, they felt something cold settle into their core, something they had no word for in the Velian language. If they had asked the humans, they would have called it fear. They never made it back to the entrance. The corridors had changed. Passages that Sun Ho had carefully marked now led to different rooms. Walls stood where open doorways had been minutes before. The structure itself was shifting, rearranging like a living maze. This is impossible, MJI said, her scanner showing routes that couldn't exist. The building is moving, stone and metal don't just move. Tell that to the building, Tammin muttered, his rifles sweeping across every shadow. Communication with the harmonious dawn was gone. Only static came through their radios. They were cut off, trapped somewhere deep inside the structure with no clear way out. Then the lights started changing. Bioluminescent patterns appeared on the walls, spreading like glowing veins, blue and sickly green, pulsing with a rhythm that felt wrong to watch. The patterns moved, crawled, reaching toward them like living things. Everybody stay close, Day 1 ordered. Lights on, weapons ready. Weapons against what? Theris asked. Their skin Now a frightened white we have seen. Nothing to fight, something groaned. In the depths below them, a sound so deep and vast that Theros felt it in their bones rather than heard it. It was the sound of something immense, waking up after a very long sleep. The Laris's sensors, far more advanced than human equipment, detected what the others could not, a presence massive and ancient and hungry. It existed in ways that shouldn't be possible, occupying spaces that were both here and not here. At the same time, there's something down there, Theros whispered, something alive, something impossible. How big? Day One asked. The entire structure. It is the structure, we're inside it. The humans exchanged looks. No panic, no disbelief. Just immediate acceptance and adaptation. Taemin checked his ammunition. MJI pulled out additional power cells. Sung-ho started looking for high ground. Hana loaded something into her pistol that glowed blue. You believe me? Bellaris asked, surprised. You accept this impossible thing? The universe is full of impossible things. Hana said calmly, we just deal with them one at a time. The first attack came without warning. Shadows peeled themselves from the walls, taking form and substance. They looked almost like people, but wrong, stretched and distorted, with too many limbs and faces that were just suggestions of features. They moved like smoke, phasing through solid matter. One reached for the felt cold spread through their body, felt their life energy being pulled away. Then Taemin was there, firing his weapon. The shadow thing screamed in a voice that hurt to hear and retreated. They're feeding on bioelectricity, MJI shouted, scanning the entities. Their energy parasites. More shadows came, dozens of them, hundreds flowing through the walls and floor like water. The humans formed a defensive circle around the two Velian scientists in their group. The weapons fired constantly, blue energy pulses that seemed to hurt the shadow creatures, but there were too many. One of the Velians, a young engineer named Kelvoth, was grabbed by multiple shadows at once. They tried to phase through the floor, dragging Kelvoth with them. Theros heard their friends screaming, saw them being pulled into solid stone, reached out but couldn't help. The humans were firing, trying to drive the shadows back, but Kelvoth was already half gone, still screaming. Then there was only silence. Kelvoth was gone, just gone, like they had never existed. This was the moment the Laris first truly understood terror. Not academic knowledge of danger, but raw primal fear. The kind of fear that shut down thought and filled the mind with white noise. The Velian species had never known predators. They had evolved on a peaceful world among peaceful creatures. They had no instincts for this. Theros froze completely. Could not move, could not think, could only feel the crushing weight of absolute panic. Move. Day One grabbed them, physically dragging them forward. We have to move. They ran through corridors that shifted and changed. The shadow creatures followed, flowing through walls, reaching with cold hands. Taemin stayed at the rear, firing controlled bursts, keeping the horde at bay. There, Sung-ho pointed to a heavy door. Looks reinforced. We can hold. There, they piled through the door into what looked like an old laboratory. MJI and Hana immediately started working on the door controls while Day One set up defensive positions. Taemin was still outside. The Laris could see him through the closing door, firing at the approaching mass of shadows. The lieutenant looked Back once made eye contact with Day. One and smiled. Go, Tammin said. Simply, then he pulled something from his belt, the door sealed shut. 3 seconds later, the explosion shook the entire structure. Theris watched on a still functioning security monitor as fire filled the corridor. Tammin had detonated his explosives, collapsing the passage. The shadows screamed and retreated from the flames. Tammin didn't get up. He's dead, the Laris said numbly. He sacrificed himself, Hana corrected gently. She was crying, but her hands remained steady as she worked on fortifying their position. He bought us time, he saved us. I don't understand. How can you keep working? How can you keep moving? Don't you feel it? The fear? Hana looked at them with wet eyes and a determined expression. Of course we feel it. Humans evolved as both predator and prey. We know how to be afraid better than most species. We just don't let it stop us. She went back to setting up barricades. Beyond the sealed door, something massive moved in the darkness, searching for them. We're going to die here, Theris whispered. Maybe, Dan said. But not without a fight. The Velian scientist looked at these strange, violent, beautiful humans and realized they weren't preparing to die. They were preparing to survive. Even in the face of impossible horror, even with tears on their faces and terror in their hearts, they kept moving forward. Outside, the shadows gathered. Inside, the humans reloaded their weapons and planned their next move. And the Laris, for the first time in their life, tried to be brave. 6 hours passed in the sealed laboratory. 6 hours of waiting while something prowled outside. The shadow creatures had learned they no longer threw themselves mindlessly at the door. Instead, they tested it, probing, finding weaknesses, growing smarter. Sun Ho lay against the wall, his breathing shallow. A shadow creature had reached through the door before they fully sealed it, touching him for only a second, but that second was enough. His skin was gray, his energy draining. Slowly, MJI sat beside him, holding his hand, checking his vital signs every few minutes with increasingly worried expressions. The other Velian scientist had retreated into a corner, their skin locked in a pale, terrified white. They weren't responding to anything, lost completely in their fear. The Laris understood. They felt the same pull toward that empty, frozen state, the desire to simply shut down rather than face this horror. We need to negotiate, Theris said suddenly. There must be a way to communicate, to find peace. Violence isn't the answer. Day One looked up from the ancient computer terminal he was trying to access. His face was tired but patient. Some things in this universe don't want peace. They don't want to talk. They just want to consume. You can't know that. We haven't tried to communicate with it. We tried, Hana said quietly. She was preparing more ammunition, her movements automatic from long practice while you were helping Minji. With Sung Ho, I tried every communication method I know, verbal, mathematical, visual patterns. I got a response. You did. What did it say? Hana's hand stopped moving. It said, we taste like terror and defiance mixed together. It said, humans are its favorite flavor because we're afraid and fighting at the same time. It thinks this is funny. The words hit Theris like cold water. They had no response to that in their entire life. Among their entire species, they had never encountered something that wanted to hurt for the joy of hurting. I don't understand you, Theris said, looking at each human in turn. You're terrified, I can see it, your hands shake, your breathing is too fast, your bodies are screaming that you should run, hide, surrender, but you don't, you keep fighting. How? Day one sat down. Next to them, he pulled out a small photograph from his pocket, worn from being handled many times, a young girl with a bright smile, maybe 8 years old. My daughter Bora, she's on Earth. Probably in school right now. When I'm scared, really scared, I think about her, about keeping her world safe. Me spoke next, not looking away from Sang-ho. Humans have been afraid for our entire existence. When we lived in caves, we were afraid of the dark, of predators, of winter. We survived ice ages, plagues that killed half our population, predators that hunted us. We were prey. Once, did you know that some of our ancestors were eaten by big cats and other hunters? That's horrible. Delaris whispered. It's life, Hana said. Earth taught us that the universe doesn't care about fairness. It doesn't care if you're peaceful or kind, so we learn to be afraid and keep moving. Anyway, we learned that courage is not being afraid. Courage is being afraid and doing what needs to be done. Regardless, the lights flickered, then went out completely. Emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in red. The temperature dropped suddenly, their breath visible in the cold air. Then the attacks began, not physical this time. Psychological. The shadow entity reached into their minds. They saw their home world burning, their family being consumed by shadows. Every person they loved dying while they watched helpless. The visions felt absolutely real. They could smell the smoke, hear the screaming, feel their heart breaking. The other Velian scientist collapsed, completely catatonic. Their mind had shut down entirely rather than process the horror, but the humans faced their visions and kept moving. Theris could see the terror on their faces, the tears streaming down. Day one was seeing something that made him shake. Hana was sobbing while she worked. MJI was whispering, not real, not real, not real, like a prayer, but they didn't stop. They kept fortifying their position, kept checking their weapons, kept planning. How? The Laris gasped, still trapped in visions of their world ending. How can you move? Hana came to them, grabbed their shoulder. Her face was wet with tears. Her eyes were haunted, but her voice was steady because someone has to. That's what courage is, not the absence of fear, but loving something more than you. Fear death. I'm terrified right now. Absolutely terrified, but I love my family, my friends, my world more than I fear this thing, so I keep moving. Words broke through Theris's paralysis. They understood. Finally, these humans weren't brave because they didn't feel fear. They were brave because they felt fear and chose to act anyway. Doing made a sound of discovery at the terminal. I've accessed the facility logs. This place was a research station. The species that built it was trying to weaponize something they found in what they called the space between spaces. They lost control. It consumed them all, and has been waiting here ever since. Waiting for what? MJI asked. For someone to wake it up, for new food. Day one scrolled through more files. There's a maintenance tunnel system, old escape route. I can open it from here, but the controls are manual only. Someone needs to stay at this terminal to keep the doors open for the others. The meaning was clear. Someone had to stay behind. I'll do it, Day one said immediately. Captain, no, Hana started, not a debate. I'm giving the order. Daewon looked at. Each of them get to the surface, get to. The ship warned the galaxy about this. Place, he showed Theris the tunnel. Route on the terminal. Explained how to. Follow the markers. Then he did something strange. He put his hand on Theris's shoulder and looked them in the eyes. Listen to me. You're going to be afraid, that's okay. Being afraid means you understand what you might lose, but you're going to keep moving anyway because now you understand. What's worth protecting, you're going to make it out, you're going to remember us, and you're going to make sure nobody else dies here. Can you do that? These skin flickered through a dozen colors. Fear, grief, determination. Yes, Captain, knew. Good. Daewon smiled. It was warm and genuine and heartbreaking. Now go, that's an order. The tunnel door opened. Hana pulled Sung Ho to his feet. Supporting his weight, MJI took one last look at Daewon, saluted and entered the tunnel. Thace paused at the entrance. Looking back, Daewon had his rifle ready facing the sealed door. He looked calm. Ready, Captain, aren't you afraid? And a WF afraid, I will bid. Daewon laughed. It was real laughter. Somehow even now terrified, but my daughter gets to live in a universe without this thing in it, that's worth it. The tunnel door began to close. Through the narrowing gap, the Laris heard Daewon's weapon start firing. Heard him shout something defiant in Korean, heard him laugh again. Then the door sealed shut, and they were running through darkness, tears freezing on their crystalline skin, learning what it meant to be brave. The maintenance tunnels were never meant for escape, Theris realized. This after the first hour of descent. The path kept leading down deeper into the structure, not up toward the surface. The markers Daewon had shown them were being rearranged, changed, leading them exactly where the entity wanted them to go. They were being herded like prey. Sung Ho's condition was getting worse. He could barely walk. Now, even with Hana supporting him, his skin was cold to the touch, his breathing shallow and irregular. The brief contact with the shadow creature was killing him slowly. Rest, MJI said, helping them lower Sung Ho against the tunnel wall just for a minute, but they all knew they weren't stopping for rest. They were stopping because Sung Ho was dying. The pilot opened his eyes, focused on Minji with effort. Hey, don't be sad. This is better than living forever as a coward, right? You're not dying, MJI said fiercely. We're getting out of here, all of us, MJI. Sung Ho and LT Uncan GT's voice was weak but gentle. We both know that's not true. But that's okay, you'll make it. You have to. Someone needs to remember. His eyes found the Laris. Tell them we tried. Tell them we didn't give up. I will. Theris promised, their voice breaking. I will remember. Sung Ho smiled. Then his eyes closed. MJI didn't cry. Not yet. The warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and hard and absolutely determined. Let's move, she said. Her voice was flat. Empty. Let's finish this. The tunnels opened into a massive chamber, the heart of the structure. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, veins of sick light that converged on the center of the room. And there, hanging in the air, existing in multiple dimensions at once, was the entity. Teresa's sensors screamed warnings. The thing was vast, beyond comprehension. It existed partially in normal space, partially in realms that physics said shouldn't exist. It was ancient, older than civilizations, older than some stars. And it was aware, terribly hungrily. Aware, it spoke directly into their minds. Not words, but concepts that translated themselves into understanding, new food. Fresh fear, the humans taste so good, so afraid yet so defiant. I have been feeding on trapped beings for millennia. You will join them, your terror will sustain me for centuries. The chamber was full of them, thousands of beings, trapped in some half-state between life and death, kept alive just enough to keep producing fear for the entity to feed on. Theorists could feel their terror, an ocean of anguish spanning 10,000 years. This is what you want. MJI screamed at the entity. Human fear. Human terror. Let me show you something better. Let me show you human rage. She pulled out every explosive device she carried, started setting them up around the chamber's power core, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with stolen life energy. What are you doing? Dolaris asked, overloading it. This entire structure is built around this core. We destroy it, the whole thing collapses, including that thing. End quote. The entity laughed. The sound was like breaking glass inside their minds. You cannot hurt me. I am beyond your understanding. I am forever. Nothing's forever, Hana said, helping MJI with the explosives. Humans learned that lesson a long time ago. Everything ends, even you. The entity tried to break them. It showed them visions. Theorists saw their home world burning again, saw their family being consumed, saw every person they loved dying in horrible ways. The visions felt absolutely real, perfect in every detail. But this time Dolaris remembered Hana's words. They remembered Daewon's sacrifice. They remembered Taman's smile as he stayed behind. They remembered Songho's last words. It's not real, Thera said through the terror. You're showing me what I fear. But fear doesn't control me anymore. The Velian scientist picked up one of the explosive devices with shaking hands and started setting it up. They were terrified, absolutely terrified, but they understood now. Being afraid didn't mean being helpless. The entity screamed. It manifested physical forms, sending wave after wave of shadow creatures at them. The humans fought with everything they had, buying time for the charges to be set, but there were too many. Hana was grabbed, pulled toward one of the walls that would trap her in eternal torment. She fired her weapon into the mass of shadows, her face showing both terror and defiance. MJI ran to help her, firing as she moved, but more shadow came. They swarmed over her, and for a moment Dolaris was sure she would fall. But MJI was crying now, crying for Songho, for Daewon, for Taman, for everything they had lost, and that grief transformed into pure fury. She fought like something wild and terrible, driving the shadows back through sheer rage and determination. She reached Hana, pulled her free, but the effort cost her. A shadow creature grabbed her from behind, beginning to drain her. Go, MJI shouted. The charges are set. 5 minutes, run, we're not leaving you. Hana screamed. You have to, someone has to tell them. Me looked at Theris. Remember us, remember what humans do. When cornered, we don't surrender, we don't give up, we fight always. She pulled something from her belt, her last explosive, held it up so the entity could see it. You want to know what humans taste like? We taste like defiance. Choke on it. The explosion threw them backward into the tunnel. Way behind them collapsed, sealing me with the entity and its shadow servants. Through the falling stone, they could Hear her still fighting, still screaming. Defiance even as she was dying. Then there was only silence and the sound of their own running footsteps. 4 minutes. Until the main charges detonated. 4 minutes to get out of a structure that was Killam deep and actively fighting. Them, we're not going to make it, Hana said as they ran. It wasn't despair. Just acknowledgement of reality. Then we die trying, Thais said. That's what humans do. Hana looked at them with surprise and pride. Yes, yes it is. They ran toward the surface, toward the light, toward whatever end awaited them. Behind them the charges counted down. The entity screamed in a voice that shook dimensions, and somewhere in the chaos Theris realized they weren't just running from horror anymore. They were running towards something worth dying for, the chance to warn the galaxy, the chance to honor the sacrifice of their friends. They were running with courage. 3 minutes. The structure was collapsing around them. Not falling apart randomly, but fighting them. Walls slammed shut in their path. Floors gave way beneath their feet. Entity was using its last moments to ensure they died with it. Theris and Hana ran through corridors that twisted and changed. Their lungs burned, their legs screamed. For rest behind them they could hear the deep rumble of the power core beginning to destabilize. 2 minutes. They burst into a larger chamber and found their path blocked by a wall that hadn't been there before. Solid stone. No way around, no way through. No. Hana gasped. No. We were so close, but Theris was scanning the wall with their advanced sensors. There's a weak point here. If we can break through, we don't have anything strong enough. Yes, we do. Theris pulled out the weapon Tammin had given them during training. The one they had been too afraid to use. Humans aren't the only ones who can learn to fight. They fired again and again. The weapon kicked hard against their crystalline body, but they held steady. The wall cracked, then crumbled. The path opened. 1 minute they could see daylight ahead. The exit was there. So close, less than 100 meters away. Then the entity manifested. Fully its true form, pulled entirely into normal space by its rage and desperation. It was massive, a thing of shadows and stolen light with too many limbs and a presence that made reality itself seem to bend. It was dying. The overload killing it, but it had enough strength for one last act. It reached for them with impossible speed. Hana shoved the Larais forward. Run, get to the surface. The entity grabbed her, lifting her into the air. She screamed, not in fear but in fury, still firing her weapon into the thing's mass even as it drained her life away. I won't leave you, Theris shouted. You have to. Someone has to tell them. Someone has to remember. 30 seconds. Rumbling was a roar now. The entire structure was coming apart. Theris looked at Hana, looked at the entity, looked at the weapon in their hands. They were terrified. Every instinct screamed at them to run, to save themselves, to let evolution's oldest command take over. But they had learned something from the humans. They had learned that being afraid was okay. That having every reason to run was okay. What mattered was what you chose to do. Despite that fear, they turned back, aimed their weapon at the entity's center mass where it held Hana and fired. The shot was perfect. It struck something vital in the entity's form. The thing screamed, a sound that broke across dimensions. Its grip loosened for just a second, just long enough. Hana dropped, rolled, came up running. Go, 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 she screamed. They ran Together, the entity thrashed behind them, wounded, dying, reaching out with the last of its strength. The ceiling collapsed. The floor cracked and fell away. Reality itself seemed to be tearing apart. 15 seconds. They reached the entrance, burst out into daylight. The twin suns of KX-447 were the most beautiful thing Thelaris had ever seen. 5 seconds. They ran across the empty ground, away from the structure as fast as their bodies could move. 0. The explosion was silent at first, a moment of perfect stillness, then the shock wave hit, throwing them forward. The ancient structure imploded, falling in on itself, dragging down into the earth. The entity's death scream echoed not through air but through space itself, a psychic shriek that every living being in the system felt. Then silence. Beautiful, perfect silence. Theris lay on the ground, staring up at the sky. Alive somehow. Impossibly alive. Next to them, Hana was laughing and crying at the same time. "We made it," Hana said. "We actually made it." The harmonious dawn descended, having broken free of whatever had been blocking communications. Rescue, safety, survival, but it didn't feel like victory, not with so many dead, not with so many sacrifices made. 6 months later, Theris stood before the Galactic Assembly. Every species in the known galaxy had representatives present. The chamber was vast, filled with thousands of delegates, all waiting to hear the testimony. Thelaris activated the holographic display, showed them recordings from the structure, showed them Tammon's last stand, smiling as he detonated explosives, showed them Duan and LT Unk and GTS calm acceptance as he stayed behind, showed them Sunho's gentle death, showed them Minji's rage as she fought to give them time to escape. The chamber was silent, completely silent. Many of the delegates were crying. "I was taught," Theris said, their voice carrying clearly through the vast space, that humans were violent, that they were dangerous, that they were too quick to fight, too ready for war. I was wrong." They paused, letting the words sink in. Humans are not violent. They are protective. They do not love war. They love each other more than they fear death. Every human who died in that structure died buying time for others to live. Every one of them faced absolute horror and chose to fight anyway, not because they weren't afraid, but because they understood what was worth protecting. They showed them the final recordings, the structure collapsing, the entities' death, the narrow escape. "I propose a formal alliance with humanity, not because we fear what they might do to us, but because we need what they can teach us. They can teach us courage. They can teach us that being afraid doesn't mean being helpless. They can teach us how to face the darkness and not break." The vote was unanimous, the first time in Galactic Assembly history that every species agreed. Later, Theris traveled to Earth, to a small city where Day One had lived. The captain's family welcomed them with kindness despite their grief. Bora was 9 years old now. She had her father's eyes. She sat quietly as Theris told her everything about how brave her father had been, about how he had smiled and made jokes even in the face of death, about how his last thoughts had been of her. "Were you afraid?" Boa asked, her voice small. Thais knelt down to her level. Their skin shifted colors, showing emotions that humans could now read. "Terrified. More afraid than I had ever been in my life, but you kept going anyway." "Yes. Your father taught me that was okay." That being afraid means you understand what you stand to lose, and fighting anyway means you understand what's worth protecting. Bora thought about this. Then she hugged Theris. The Velian scientist hugged her back. This small human child, and felt tears form in their eyes for the first time. On their shoulder they wore a small patch, the emblem of the Harmonious Dawn. They would wear it for the rest of their life, carrying the memory of the humans who had taught them the true meaning of courage. That evening they attended a memorial service. Daewon's name was added to a wall with thousands of others, humans who had died protecting others, humans who had faced darkness and said no further. The inscription on the wall read, "They were afraid, they fought anyway, remember them." Delaris touched the wall, feeling the names carved there: Tammin, Sunung Ho, MJI, Daewon, and thousands more, stretching back through human history. All of them afraid, all of them fighting anyway. The Velian scientist understood now. True horror wasn't about what scared you. It wasn't about the darkness or the monsters or the impossible things that wanted to consume you. True horror was about what you were willing to become to protect others, about the sacrifices you would make, about the fear you would face and overcome because something mattered more than your own safety. The humans had shown them this, had died teaching this lesson. The Laris would make sure the galaxy never forgot. As the twin moons rose over Earth, casting their silver light across the memorial wall, Theris made a promise to Daewon and his daughter, to all the humans who had taught them courage. "I will remember, we will all remember, and we will be worthy of what you gave us." And an Arab so wind carried their words away into the night, and somewhere perhaps the humans who had died facing horror heard them and smiled.